Welcome, friends, to the Someone Gets Me podcast. I am your host, Dianne A, and I am so delighted that you're here. This podcast was created because I believe there is a visionary leader inside each one of us who is waiting to be seen. In each episode of Someone Gets Me, you will hear useful tips from successful visionaries who will share their stories about how being seen has allowed them to take their vision out into the world with action. Hi, everybody. It's Dianne at Someone Gets Me, here with an amazing guest. Today, we're talking about why the story doesn't matter. That's right, why the story doesn't matter. I have with me Conner Kees. He is an accomplished and brilliant visionary. He is an acupuncturist by trade, but has so many more things happening in his life. And he's in North Carolina, in the mountains, and I'm here on the beach. So this is going to be a great mix of energy coming together. Conner and I met through a mutual business person. Actually, my business coach kind of tagged me in a social media post, and I was free to offer some of my assistance. And when I got to know Conner with helping him with his podcast, Making the Medicine, I thought, oh my, you guys have to hear from him too. It's amazing, amazing, amazing. So I want to have all of us, don't forget to get your nice drink and hang out with us, and to welcome Conner Kees to the show. Welcome, Conner.
Hey, Dianne, thank you.
It's so exciting to have you here. And I feel like I have to catch everybody up on all of our neat conversations we've had so far. And so what I'd like to start with a little bit is you are an acupuncturist. You're also a musician. You also have other neat philosophical studies and all kinds of interesting things. And so tell us a little bit about what drew you to acupuncture and how you got where you are, where you want to start this podcast and get things going in a different way. Like, tell us that story, if you will.
Okay, so that's the story as a practitioner that we get asked a bit, like, what got you into Chinese medicine? What got you into acupuncture? So I'm going to give kind of the version that I've given before, which is, and we can expand on that because doing the podcast is new, as you know.
Yes.
But so let's, I'll go all the way back. And so broke up with my high school sweetheart. And when you free yourself of some of that energy, you find that you have all of this new energy because all of the light that you've given away is coming back to you. And so I said, what am I going to do with all this energy? And I said, I'm 21 at the time, something like that. I said, well, I'm going to start a garden. And so I began finally getting my fingers in the dirt. I wasn't much of an athlete growing up and didn't even really break a sweat until I was 20, truly, and realized that I'd been missing out on all this greenery and being in touch with the land, and sort of explored this natural drive in me to experience herbalism and to get in touch with the plants. And I went through college and I was really like kind of an angsty, sort of raging against the machine college person. And by the time I graduated, so at that point I had a bachelor's degree in psychology, and what am I going to do with this? And I got a job at a health food store, and things really pretty quickly spiraled out from there. I got connected with some herbalists through connections in the health food industry, and then found myself becoming a certified Western herbalist, a member of the American Herbalist Guild, going to herbalist conferences. And what I realized working in the health food industry is that people coming into the health food store for their, congestive heart failure is not enough. It's like, yeah, you maybe can take some dandelion and pee off some of the excess fluid, but like, what you read on Google and what Dr. Oz says is not enough. So that's what really motivated me to become a healthcare practitioner, to become an acupuncturist. Acupuncture was really my chosen. It just kind of felt natural to me, and here I am. And so I now have my master's in acupuncture and Oriental medicine, and I last year, actually April 1st, 2019, I moved here to Black Mountain, North Carolina, because I acquired a very successful 20-year-old acupuncture practice known as Source for Wellbeing. and we simply call it source, Diane. And it's the practice is called source, and I love that about it, obviously. And fast forward, we're all experiencing this crisis, and I decided what better opportunity to sit in front of a microphone like I am with you now and kind of get the word out about some of the philosophies that have motivated both my kind of like intellectual grasp of some of the intricacies of Chinese medicine, some of the metaphysics, but also my spirituality. And so here we are, and as you said, it's called the podcast is called Making the Medicine, but I'm sure we'll talk about a whole lot today.
That's I just love the stories of how people get into their field, and especially people where it's kind of just the organic thing, and so I'm curious about, when did the love for the philosophy and the Tao and all that stuff, when did all that start infusing? Was it just kind of organic along the way, or was there like somebody who said, here, Conner, check this out? Or how did that work? Because your knowledge base and the way you integrate it is quite powerful. I'm just kind of curious how it came together.
It's so what came first actually is an interest in metaphysics and in sort of like in the esoteric schools of thought that are often kind of undercurrents in many people's spirituality these days. And when this is funny, Diane, you're so good. I was just thinking about this earlier today, actually, and that is that around the same time, about 2021, when my path kind of shifted and things started clicking in place, my then stepmother, she handed me a tarot deck of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and she said, I couldn't be more green to this whole thing. And she hands me a tarot deck, and it's absolutely one of the most daunting and in many ways creepy, black and white, intricate, just weird tarot deck or tarot, actually. And she says, here's a tarot deck, and you might want to check out Carl Jung. I think you'd like Carl Jung. And that kind of set me on the path. And it's just what a loaded way to get started. But again, I feel like relative to some people, I may even be kind of may have been late to the game, but I'm perfectly fine with that. And she also said, this is interesting too. She also said, I remember being on the beach with her once. I'm pretty sure I was 21 at this point, and she said, we were swinging on the swing, and she said, Conner, I think you'd make a good acupuncturist. I know an acupuncturist, and I could see you being an acupuncturist. You should look into that. And at this point, I was like just starting my bachelor's in psychology and going through that whole process, and completely put it in the back of my mind. And it wasn't until years later when I said, oh my gosh, she was right. And so just interesting stuff. And then, and so while I was also getting my bachelor's degree in psychology, I dived really hard into particular to name drop here. There's a podcast called Partially Examined Life. It's a philosophy podcast. It's a podcast on Western philosophy. And I think if you do enough of that podcast, as people like me have, it's essentially equipped. There's enough hours of education, really high level education in Western philosophy in that podcast to essentially afford you a pretty solid education in Western philosophy. So while I was getting the degree in psychology, studying the neurobiology and cognitive psychology and behavioral psychology and all that kind of stuff, I was satisfying some of my philosophical, intellectual interests by studying Western philosophy. And then all the while, for me personally, there's this spiritual undercurrent, because Western philosophy and biopsychology are kind of divorced from that, from spirit, from source. And it's a product of some of the philosophical worldviews that have powered our entire world since before the Industrial Revolution. And so we're seeing some of this even play out in the crisis, by the way.
Right.
Which is a whole other topic. But yeah, so here I am. And so that's kind of how I got interested, not just in the philosophy, but knowing too that all along the way that there's been spiritual undercurrent for me. Oh, and that's right. I had this conversation with someone recently the other day too, and that is that, well, so full disclosure, they listen to the podcast, and this is a very influential person, so I'm happy they were talking to me about this in the first place. And they listened to the podcast, and they said, wow, I can just see you as a kid reading the Tao of Physics. I said, no, actually, as a kid, it was the Tao Te Ching. So when I was in 8th grade, I had a little pocket Tao Te Ching that I would carry around with me, and it's hard to be a truly applied philosophical Taoist, or like in the same way that that's akin to Buddhism and the values of non-attachment and those kinds of things. It's hard. That's really challenging. It's not easy, and especially as an adult and all of our attachments, which we can't escape from. But when you're in 7th grade, 8th grade, you could be a pretty good Taoist as you know, and so that actually was part of it too. I remember my dad even saying the Tao Te Ching is a really important book, and so I got one at a very young age, read it, and it's been it's so fascinating, Diane, when you look through these things. It's just an incredible story, each of our lives and the way that everything connects.
Yes.
And so yeah.
The connection's fascinating, and I'm listening to the thread of they just suggest something and go, and then sooner or later either go into it right away or wrap around and it shows back up. And like there was a knowingness in all of that, whether anybody knew it or not at the time, to even begin to do it. So I'd like to talk for a minute about the power of spirituality in business and in running a business and in being a person of influence. And because it's very important, I think that, and I think there's a lot of disconnection in our society with, let's do everything from the head up. And that's where the anger and the craziness and the making no sense part shows up. And, and having a spiritual connection and spirit being vital in business or in running our lives, I think is something that all of us could just always keep working on and expanding on. And so share a little bit about how you use your spiritual compass in your business and in your life. Like what do you do? And how do you allow spirit to express through you? Because there's people listening in, over 60 countries. And there's
Wow.
probably people out there asking the questions, well, but how? How do you do it? And so what are some how tips that Conner has used or uses to keep spirit like in that rock solid spot in your business, in your new podcast, and all of these things?
Goodness gracious. One of the first things that comes to mind is something that I tell my patients. I refer to the people that I work with as either people that I work with or clients. But so one of the things that I tell my clients is that when they oftentimes people will sit down with me and they'll say, "Oh, Conner, I had a burger. I had some gluten, Conner," and there's either this self abnegation, there's this self loathing, and this kind of like an internal rat race or something like that.
Right.
And so what I have to say to that is that it's always a conversation. You're not in competition with anyone. It's a process, like absolutely everything. And it's a process that I absolutely, most certainly myself am in and deeply embedded in. But we've talked, I think you and I have even discussed this before. There's no finish line.
Right.
There is the goal, and enlightenment is a fleeting thing. And so how does spirit inform business, Diane? That's a good question, because I haven't been an entrepreneur for that long. But one of the things that comes to mind too, one of the things that my mentors had taught me early on, she happens to be the incredible woman that I purchased source from, the practice, is that money is just energy. Money is just an exchange of energy, and there's really an infinite amount of that available to you at any point in time. And so abundance and abundance consciousness, as opposed to poverty consciousness, is something that, man, it is deeply embedded in so many of us in such a deep way. And I really think, like all things, like having yourself have the burger. Have the burger. It's okay. It's all there. It's all there for all of us, really. And so I hope that answers the question. It's something, it really hits the nail on the head. You're so good, Dianne. because it's so present for me too, and for many
Mhm.
of us, as we
Mhm.
transition into new ways of doing things. The economy is not there's let me put it this way, and I'm not being a negative Nancy when I say this, is that um, there's no evidence that the economy is going back to any semblance of normal anytime soon for any of us at all. And so what we're all in this process of doing is like rediscovering what's most important for us, and just trying to remake ourselves, right? And I one other colleague of mine, she said what this virus is doing is it's reminding us all what's most important. And I think that's very true too. So yeah, that's a good one, Diane. And it's not where I expected. I love how you pull these questions out. You get them in the mail slot. We've talked about that before. They come in the mail slot, right? um,
Yes, they come in the mail slot. That's why I'm an intuitive mentor for visionary leaders, because
Absolutely.
I have this amazing way to just know stuff, a
Hmm.
knowingness
Hmm.
that
And we
is
mhm.
powerful, and it's fun, and you're a visionary. So what a great conversation.
And we all do. We all have that. The mail slot is in each of us, and
Mm-hmm.
as we're going through this crisis, it's such a there's you might say that the veil is thin. The veil is thin right now, and there's so much happening cosmically that if we can kind of see what's happening as opportunity, then it's a necessity that we do so, because there is a lot of suffering, and there is death, and there is all these things, and we have to kind of like navigate the very interesting world in which we are being presented.
And you bring up,
So
okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, you go ahead. I'm
You bring up
wrapping.
you bring up a good point, and that is, that in the middle of transformation and letting go of the story and moving into like living the consciousness that we're all going toward, there it's messy, and there is a lot of
Yeah,
death and destruction because it's part of the cycles of life. It's part of all of
absolutely.
it. And so when we talk about spirituality in our business, so many people think that living a spiritual life is like this cotton candy, woo woo, Pollyanna way of doing things, when really that's not the case. That those of us who are dedicated to that higher consciousness, it takes a lot of guts and a lot of faith and a lot of trust and a lot of depth to be able to use that connection and foster it in what we're doing. And it's not woo woo and lighthearted. It's, a spiritual life takes a lot out of us. I mean, and it gives a lot too. But it's intense in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
And so I think that's a really good point that you're bringing up, because so many people can get focused on all the death and destruction and not see the opportunity, or get distracted by, oh, what's the opportunity, and pretend like all the death and destruction is not happening.
Right.
Or they can be like dialed in spiritually and see the alignment and the seasons of life cruising through, and how is this of benefit to all of us, and what can we do with
Right.
it. And
Hmm.
there's all those choices that we're all making. And so you've made some big choices in how you're doing that alignment for you personally. And so share a little bit about how that's happening. Have you been getting it in dreams or thoughts or ideas or suggestions, or where did all this start, where you started moving away from the old way of doing your business into doing podcasting and more other avenues? How is that working?
So much just came in right as you were talking, right? And so one thing can I go back a little bit about something you were just saying, is that every single day yang transforms into yin, right? And every single day the sun sets, and when night comes out, the bugs come out, the mosquitoes come out, and so this it's not just a I would I you know I might offer that, like, you and I both know we use these euphemisms like higher consciousness. So it's fascinating. There's like, what even is consciousness, first of all, and second of all, where we go, like there's a direction, like higher consciousness. So it's, I might offer that it's like, it's not just a matter of higher, it's a matter of higher, lower, inner, outer.
Right.
It's all those things. And anyway, now what was the question, Diane? Help me out here. Do you remember?
You just went. Yes, I remember the question. The question is, when we're thinking about the whole spirit part of our business and our lives, right?
Yeah.
And people say deeper or higher or lower, or whatever the language is, because language is pedestrian here. It only points to some agreed upon delusion that might be kind of close, but probably isn't, from different worldviews anyway. So putting all that aside and kind of keeping it a little bit on the simple side, and your life, and you're following your spiritual direction, and there are changes happening with how you're practicing your business, what you're doing with your life, how you're looking forward. And what the question was how is that going? What was the impetus? What kind of, did you wake up one day and went, stuff's different? What, give everybody a flavor, because I think what's really important is everybody, I believe, really wants to feel some kind of hope. And that if we can feel a little bit of hope, and if we can add a little bit of understanding to that hope, then people can calm down, our immune systems work better, our bodies work better, our life works better, and then we're able to be the creative, beneficial presence. So you are navigating and negotiating that very process. And so I'm curious if you wouldn't mind sharing some of how that's working for you, things that maybe are working great, maybe things you tried and went, nah, I'm not doing that, to help give everybody an idea of here's a trajectory, here's a road, here is something that you might want to consider thinking about.
One of the first things is to seek out wise counsel in life, to seek out if you have a therapist, they're more than likely doing telehealth consultations now. Talk to somebody. This is, first of all, if you went through the birth canal and took your first breath and are still here and listening to this podcast, you need therapy. Everybody, it's like, life is traumatic, period. And so this whole, I love the musician, but I saw this musician that was, she released this new song called "Darling, You Need Therapy." I won't say who. She's a great musician, but I was like, "Darling, you need therapy." That is not an insult. That's like, if the person is willing to receive that, then that's good for them. So, and if you don't have a therapist, then absolutely don't curl up into the corner. Seek wise counsel of people and get help. Find that hope. And if it's a matter of turning off the Facebook and all that kind of stuff, turn it off. It's a matter of turning off the mainstream media. I would absolutely
turn it off.
I would absolutely recommend that personally.
And let me interject one thing. Even with the therapist conversation, you can get wise counsel from mentors, from people who are further along the road than you, and all different kinds of things. Because I've sought out therapy over the years, and in about 4 sessions, I realized that they were really cool. I really liked them, and I could have great conversations, but they weren't able to take me down the road I knew I was called to go down. I didn't even have a name for it then. I didn't know what was going on, but I just knew it was a little bit of a mismatch, even though I liked them. So it's okay to like try different things until you find what resonates. I really, I think that's something that you've probably been doing. I know I have. And so I think it's a common thing.
Right. That's really, when I said wise counsel, like for a lot of people, if they have those pieces in place in their life, then therapy is a great outlet for that. That's the good conversation to have, because this goes for any practitioner, acupuncturist, massage therapist, chiropractor, medical doctor, anybody, therapist, anybody. If you don't resonate with them, keep on moving. Find that person. Find that person.
Amen. Yes.
When it comes to psychotherapy, what I would personally recommend is that someone find a therapist who does psychosomatic integration. So they do somatic integration in their work. That includes EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprogramming, havening technique, somatic re-experiencing, somatic respiratory, like breath work. These kinds of things are all incredibly important. So I think that if a therapist, if they're on the cutting edge and they understand the power of therapy in the 21st century, it involves being embodied. And so that's very important. So just a little, that's just my 2 cents about it.
Right. Oh, I completely agree. In
Yeah.
fact, I'm a Safe and Sound protocol provider, and Safe and Sound protocol is a precognitive music intervention that resets the vagus nerve.
Well, hello.
And helps people reconnect to the human voice, like if they're on the autism spectrum or whatever, and helps really relieve depression and anxiety and PTSD, because it helps reset the nervous system in a precognitive manner, so you can't intellectually override it, which my gifted visionary people really need, a way to not let their brain run interference and stop them, you know?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
there's all kinds of neat things out there that people can do and try and experience, and practitioners who are really good at it. So your advice to merely pay attention to who resonates with you is key. And it's okay to move on. It's okay to say, okay, thank you, I've gotten what I need, and move on, because
That's right.
sometimes you have to go through, lots of different things.
Yeah. And, to seek and embody a psychologist who's willing to work both with your body and your mind. And so it made me think of Alexander technique is another one. And your thing sounds like almost like HemiSync and the Monroe Institute type stuff. Man, that's cool. So how back to the question, and I got it this time, Dan, I got it. One of the things that really had to click for me, because being a new entrepreneur and having made this really crazy leap in my life, I graduated from acupuncture school. I moved to so I was living in Gainesville, Florida at the time, and then my roommate at the time showed me this ad for a practice for sale, and talk about being hit in the mail slot. It's like the whole newspaper just went, and within so I immediately everything dropped. I called the owner of Source at the time, and we had a fantastic conversation, and within 24 hours, within 24, maybe a little bit more actually than 24 hours, I was on the road to Black Mountain, North Carolina, and then within 10 days, I signed a contract. And so the way I described that this whole thing happens is that every proton in the universe pointed their proton guns at my protons and teleported me, right? So, teleportation, it's a holofractal kind of activity going in there. So that's one way. And so if we listen, and if we kind of step back and we pay attention to those synchronicities, even if it is it seems new agey, but the clock is keeping time. And so you see 11:11 on the clock, don't dismiss that. That means that you're in tune with something. And so I know that's, oh gosh, that's out there for some people. I don't care. I think that those who have ears to hear are gonna, it is that it's a matter of listening, right? It's that still small voice, right? And so sometimes those things, they happen to us, and that's when it's like, hello, spirit's like, course correction, like, we don't you worry about it. We see that you're struggling. We got your back. We're gonna come in here and make some pull some executive orders and sign some new stuff into
right.
It's funny because so that's an example of of when you are essentially being moved around the board, as if this is some kind of chess game. I mean, so that's an example of you being moved around the board, or any of us being moved around the board. But when it comes to this particular change, I had to really take a step back. I had to talk to some intelligent and wise people. I had to ground myself. I had to ground. And then, like you said, did you wake up and it just happened that way? Well, to tell you the truth, it did. And I even looked through my journal entries all last month, because at the end of the month, you look through all your journal entries and you're like, how was this month? And I look back in it, and it was that, because I went from like not even really thinking about it to having some really good consultation, and then it clicked. It clicked that, as a matter of fact, this is the perfect opportunity. I've wanted to have a podcast for years. It's been something that's in the back of my mind. It's been that kind of high in the sky kind of thing. Conner, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you'd love to have a podcast. Well, now's the time. Now's the time. And there's always, there's always like that feeling. It's like, oh man, it took an apocalypse to get you to publish your podcast. Well, what does it matter? We're here now, and it's cool, Diane. Now we're having this conversation. It's fun. It's fun. So I hope that answers your question. Sometimes it's a matter of being moved around the board, and sometimes it's a matter
Mm-hmm.
of taking action and then seeing those synchronicities as affirmations that you are in fact getting resynchronized on the path
Mm-hmm.
after the fact. So
Right.
you can either, sometimes somebody comes in to help you, and sometimes you have to take those steps. But sometimes those steps are even like literally going outside and getting your bare feet on the ground, like grounding in like in an
Mm-hmm.
electromagnetic sense, like actually putting your bare feet on the ground and breathing and closing your eyes and breathing. Yeah, it's all over the place, but it's, the way that spirit interacts with us is so dynamic. There really are. I said that thing about there being rules and laws. There are no rules. There are no laws. It's an infinite game that we're kind of embedded in. We're embedded in this process of spirit unfolding through us. And it reminds me of something that I was going to say in response to one of your questions earlier, but who knows what that was going to be. But yeah. Yeah.
So, so the story doesn't matter, right?
Mm,
Because when
mm,
we get hooked up in the story, we start to often get distracted and less aligned and less grounded.
yeah.
So, what are some specific things, like if somebody's listening to us and they go, okay, well, I get it. Let go of the story. I don't even know what to do. I don't even know what you guys are talking about. Like, I hear what you're saying and it's valid, but I don't know, like, where do I start? So if somebody was like a complete newbie green person, they didn't really know where to start, and they really maybe don't even understand what we're talking about when it comes to, the story doesn't matter and releasing the story, what would be like step one that you might suggest to somebody who's out there kind of curious so that they could then see what you were talking about?
I feel like so many of us we have this programming. I mean, we literally grew up walking single file, keeping our mouths shut. I mean, so there's so like, in public school, like in
Mm-hmm.
concrete hallways, like,
Mm-hmm.
and so like we went to civics class. You know what I mean? Like, so there's so much embedded programming. There's so much, like we were just talking about, poverty consciousness, that the first thing I think is to acknowledge that and be willing to question it. Because, say for instance, like I have a conversation with someone about telepathy, and
Mm-hmm.
they're like, oh well, I don't know about all that and stuff. And one of my responses is more than just like what you and I are talking about, just taking a philosophical step back and being willing to question the reality that uh, we have seemingly been handed. It's very easy to fall into a materialist, physicalist, mechanical kind of paradigm, because that's literally what everything in our civilization and our world is built upon. But if I have this conversation with someone and it's about like telepathy, or even the kind of conversations I've had with people where they say, oh, you sound like a conspiracy theorist. Well, I'm like, well, hold on now. First of all, that's not very nice. And second of all, when it comes to something like telepathy, I would admonish someone to just look at the evidence. Like, just admonish. I would invite someone to look at the evidence. And so there's such incredible information out there, and there's such reality. It turns out, we've all heard this before, but it turns out reality is stranger than fiction. So I mean, where to start? Start with patience. Start with being patient with oneself, and gosh, I don't even want to say love yourself, because it's such a challenge. Sometimes, you know what I mean? And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why I said seek out the counsel of wise people who do care for you and who can hold space for you. And if they can't hold space for you in this challenging and critical time, then seek someone else. And if you feel like you've exhausted your resources, then just surrender to spirit, surrender to that process, and then be willing to kind of go inside and question. Like, when you meditate, you're not just closing your eyes and like staring at the back of your eyelids. You know what I mean? There's so
Mm-hmm.
much more going on when you sit and you listen to that still small voice, and you have that inner peace, and yeah, there's so much going on,
So
so much
much.
more than just
Yeah.
like quieting the mind. that's
Mm-hmm.
that's like the foundation, is quieting the mind. But I would advise that kind of thing, ask for answers, pray, divine. I was talking about the tarot and stuff like that. Divine, ask questions, even if the people in your life are freaking out just as much as you are. Then ask a set of playing cards. That seems innocuous enough, right? There's answers to be found everywhere, and there's hope to be found everywhere. And one of the things that I've hung my hat on, really, thankfully, I'm glad I managed to survive my studies in Western philosophy and Nietzsche and things like that with some sense of faith,
Right.
is that one of the things I cannot let go of is that the meaning in life is actually like, it's baked in. It's literally built in to the reality in which we live. And
Mm-hmm.
so, tragedy is a real thing. I mean, like, so
Mm-hmm.
it's I think that's important too. That, like, again, getting back to this, like, the repercussions of this mechanistic, materialistic, physicalist paradigm that we've been handed for really hardcore, for the past
Mm-hmm.
400 years, especially. It's really easy to also be a nihilist, to be nihilistic, to think that life is meaningless and that you are a machine, that you are some happenstance collection of cells that are somehow functioning. And there's even, it is a, for whatever godforsaken reason, in my opinion, a tenable philosophical opinion to hold these days, that consciousness is an illusion. It's called epiphenomenalism, right? It's the idea, Daniel Dennett's book on this, explaining consciousness. And, there's a growing, it may even be the majority of, like, analytical philosophers in the sort of ivory tower establishment
Mm-hmm.
now believe that, in fact, the 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 fact that you perceive anything as being whole, the fact that you have consciousness, or what we call consciousness, is a an illusion. It's not
Yeah.
actually, there actually is no such thing. And the fact that we can convince ourselves of that, not only that, convince ourselves, but actually, like, rationalize all the way out, using all of the philosophy and science are at our disposal, because, again, we have a reductionistic, materialistic, scientific paradigm, that it's easy to fall into this trap that life is meaningless, that there is no hope. But it's okay to feel hopeless. It's okay to feel even meaningless. Like, there's no judgment, because that's, oh my gosh, it's totally okay to feel that way. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is some transcendental realm in which the grass is greener. And I submit to you, and to the audience, that meaning is, in fact, baked in. It's baked into the reality in which we live by its very nature. And so, yeah, how's that, Diane?
That's perfect. I love it. And it's
Good.
true. I think meaning is baked into all of it. And it is easy to try, get in that heavy space sometimes and try to figure it all out and everything. And you just got to start where you start and be grounded. And I think that it's a responsibility of the wise ones and the people who've already walked down the road to reach their hand out to the people who are seeking or searching or could maybe, like you know, people did that with you, even though you didn't really realize that's what they were doing at the time, but it is what happened. And I remember when you're talking, I was remembering the very first medical director I ever worked under when I was starting to wake up, which was in the 80s, I guess. And he was like, well, I'll work here until I'm not working here. And it really doesn't matter how. And he said all these things. And I'm like looking at him like everything you said was English. And I understood the meaning of it, but somehow I knew there was another meaning. And I bet you that I probably looked really goofy, like the look on my face. And I was really trying to sort out where I was going in life and stuff. And I was headed up to Washington, D.C. to see some friends on this little vacation. And I said, I can't wait. I'm going to drive down the Blue Ridge Parkway on the way home and just hang in the mountains. And I'm like a water, sailing person, but I just wanted to do that. So on the way home, he looked at me and he goes, just go find the highest spot from wherever you are in the mountains and just sit there and ask what to do. Now you have to understand, at the time, I had no spiritual understanding. I didn't use any of the language I use now. I had no idea what the heck the guy was saying. I didn't even know why it even mattered. I didn't even know that there was a question to ask. Like none of it, it was completely off my radar on every level. However, what I learned later was him and lots of other people saw the spiritual giftedness in me. I just didn't know that's what it was. I thought everybody was just being lazy. I don't know. It was like very confusing. But I did what he said. I'm going and I'm with my friend and I'm like, I gotta go find a mountain, but there's a waterfall. So I'll just go high there by the high because I love waterfalls.
Oh, wow.
And I go and I hang out by this waterfall and I sit there and I ask what to do. And, it was nice. Like, it wasn't like, the bush, there was no burning bush or anything, but it was nice. And about halfway home to St. Pete, it popped in my head that I was supposed to resign from where I was working. And of course, the next thought was, well, you don't have another job and you got to support yourself. And what do you do? Like all of the stuff. And so I had like that night before I had to go back to work the next day. So I had like about 18 hours after I got home to process this. And I'm like, completely naive to what was going on. I walked in the next morning and resigned in the front office, walked back to the unit. It was a big hospital. Walked back to the unit I was working on, hadn't really told anyone yet there what I did. And I only did it because that was what popped in my head on the way back. And he said, listen for the message, completely trusting, but not even really realizing that it was good or a thing. Like I had no awareness. I was just very naive. And I walked into my office and there were these two gentlemen who ran like an extended care center that we referred to a lot, offering me a job that tripled my salary. And I was like, okay. And I quietly accepted it. Inside, I'm like, what is happening? Like it was the craziest thing. And then I, when I saw that particular doctor who I still consider my very first spiritual mentor for multiple other reasons, and I told him what happened, he grinned and he goes, good. That was all he said, but he knew, and I trusted. And I'm glad that I have that spiritual naivete kind of, because it makes it easier for me to trust. I have less to fight through than some of the people I work with. But when you were talking about all that, I was thinking about that story about how, there's no accident in it all. And if we just let it happen and we allow, then magical things happen. And that is how your podcast is going to be affecting people everywhere, because I've listened to it, obviously. So I'd like to talk about making the medicine. And would you tell everybody about it? Because, I asked you, I'm like, does this mean that I'm going to listen to a podcast where you're making cool Chinese herbal things? Because I really dig all that. And you're like, no, Diane, that's not what it is. And so you explained to me what it was. So in your words, tell everybody about making the medicine, this new podcast. You guys are going to dig it, love it. Like Conner sends me the episodes as they come out. And I love it. I've already subscribed to every place he could possibly put that thing because it's amazing. So tell everybody about making the medicine.
Thank you, Diane. So making the medicine, like you said, there's may seem like, oh, well, Conner's an herbalist. Maybe this is a podcast about how to tincture, your reishi mushroom and your stuff like that. And it turns out making the medicine is it's an homage to some of the Taoist alchemical literature that's out there, that's been translated into English, because unfortunately I don't read Chinese. But that doesn't matter. It doesn't stop you. Episode 6, by the way, talks about this very fact, but which comes out next Friday. So making the medicine, what the medicine is I like to think of it as the very thing that we're talking about, which is a form of, it's kind of an allusion to the faith in the process and in the path, right? Like you say, Diane, we're here on purpose with a purpose. We're talking about the fact that somebody's got your back. And what I find really interesting is that the Taoist alchemists through time have seemingly had foreknowledge of some of the quantum biological and quantum mechanical discoveries that have been made since, quantum mechanics was first sort of really discovered at the very turn of the 20th century and then formalized in the 50s. And then, since the 60s and 70s, we've been realizing how our understanding of the quantum vacuum, the quantum foam, the zero point energy field, whatever you want to call it. I call it the ether in the podcast because that's what it's always been called in Western philosophy before it was supposedly debunked in the 19th century. I go into that in a bit in some of the podcasts as well. But they started studying quantum biology and some of the quantum mechanical implications of our discoveries into biology in the 60s and 70s. And it seems as though, like, with the way that the Taoist alchemists talk about light, the way that they refer to what's called the holofractal nature of reality. It's called the holofractographic nature of reality. Again, this is Nassim Haramein's work, and I refer to it in my podcast as well. But it seems as though they knew something ahead of time, which isn't that the case. Isn't that always the case with these mystics, these mystical traditions? They are tapping into a field of information that is available to everyone. It's like we were just talking about how the mail slot is everybody's got a mail slot. And at the same time, like we were just saying, somebody's got your back. So what the medicine is it's, they believe that after meditating for a real long time and doing all these practices to a certain extent, some of them were really hardcore about these practices, but after essentially pondering this and philosophizing about this and coming to your own understanding, your own innate understanding of what this medicine is, that you essentially crystallize a little piece of the ether inside yourself. And so that's called the medicine. It's also called the golden elixir, the jindan. And so it's also referred to as the golden flower. And if for any of your listeners who've studied Western alchemy or Hermetic alchemy, it is, for all intents and purposes, the same thing as the philosopher's stone. And so I, being an acupuncturist, being interested in particularly in Chinese metaphysics and in Chinese philosophy and in Taoism, I really like to look at how the Taoist alchemists seem to have really predicted some of our discoveries, particularly in quantum biology, because there's books like the Tao of Physics, just been out for decades, the relationship between the Tao, which is it's translated as the way, right? It's that thing to which all things must return, and that thing from which all things arise, and like I said, must return. So like, that is the ether. That is a description of the quantum vacuum. That is a description of the zero point energy field, whatever you want to call it. These are just names. Like I said, the Taoists call it the Tao, right? Same thing, exact same thing. Greek philosophers called it the ether. I refer to it as the ether often as well. And it's not just that, but some of the implications about the body's use of light really just resonates with our understanding of quantum biology. And I'm interested in quantum biology and biophysics as well. So I'm taking my understanding of biophysics, and I'm not a biophysicist, by the way. I read the literature and I grok it, and I try and wrap my head around it, and it absolutely blows my mind when I read these studies. And then I take my philosophical understanding of what's being said in there, and I'm like, well, how does this map onto Taoist metaphysics? And it does really nicely. And it's an exploration in ideas, right? And so there's also a practice that's often referred to as energy work. You're familiar with this. I heard you say something about the light workers manual. Yes. And so like, we
Yes.
know this, we know Reiki, we know these kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, in the same way that it is, if I was going to have a conversation with someone about telepathy and they're like, man, I say, well, look into the research, hold on now, take it, you know, do your homework, essentially. Like, it's all there. It's really not much up for debate whether or not you think telepathy is a thing. We all experience it, but again, because of this mechanistic paradigm that we're in, we deny that that's actually what's happening, right? So same thing goes for what's referred to as energy healing or Reiki or light work. I refer to it as intentional healing because the fantastic scientist Lynn McTaggart wrote this book, The Power of Eight, which is all about how, like, when you get 8 people together who may have never meditated or sat and had any kind of contemplative practice for a single minute of their lives, they sit and they gather with 7 other people and they simply direct their intention towards the healing of another person or a certain event for a certain outcome. They intend for a certain outcome. And what happens is remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable. And so that's highly suggested reading The Power of Eight, any of Lynn McTaggart's work, The Field. So it's just to complicate things even further, it's kind of a fusion of, again, so being an acupuncturist, the Taoist alchemical literature and their perception of light and their perception of the way in which the body utilizes this energy, which is extracted from the Tao, aka quantum biology, aka how your cells literally compress the hexagonal structure of water in order to and have this piezoelectric effect where it's squeezing pure voltage from the quantum vacuum. This is all discovered, this is all true. And then, like, what's the relationship between us as not just electromagnetic beings but quantum electrodynamic beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And our ability to intend that something heals and it be healed, right? And so the research is out there. The research is out there for Reiki and intentional healing, all these kinds of things. Again, if someone were to say, oh, power of prayer, I would say, yeah, power of prayer. And so that's what the podcast is about. It's me teasing out some of these ideas. Some of it's stuff that I've thought about for a while. Some of it's stuff that's coming to light. And I am absolutely, Dianne, having a blast. And when you talk about being aligned with purpose, when you talk about like how you get on this path and how these things manifest for you, how these changes take place, I truly feel blessed to be delivering this podcast now to the world and to be seeing how it's unfolding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's really amazing. And I have a lot of people contact me and listen to this episode, or what do you think about that? And all these different things. And I just kind of had that intuition when I met you the first time. I'm like, okay, I'll listen to it. And I listened to it. I'm like, oh my, this is great. It's amazing on so many levels, especially for visionaries or people who really want to think about it and use lots of centers of their brains and understanding. And I love it. I think it's great. So I'm so excited that you're on the show. And I think that I'm sitting here thinking and listening to you, thinking about the whole idea of letting go of the story. We could do like 5 or 6 podcast episodes, you and I. We should probably do a couple more, because I'm sitting here going, had you not had the courage to follow the intuition to let go of some of the previous part of your story, the podcast wouldn't be happening. Or it wouldn't be happening, at least in the way it is and in the time it is, when it's so important to help people wake up and move through what's happening in a way that makes sense. And so you are like a living example of somebody who is willing to be free of the story to do the higher thing. And so I just wanted to make sure, if any listeners haven't figured that out, I certainly have. So it's really powerful. I think it's really exciting. And so we're going to put a link to your podcast and all of your contact information in the show notes along with your bio, so that all of you who are listening to Conner going, oh my God, I got to hear more, or I want to follow this guy, there's all kinds of places to do it. And I know I'm excited every time I know an episode's coming out. And I can't say that about every podcast. I can say it about Conner's podcast. And I'm so honored that you have come to hang out on the show. And I have a million other questions, but I need to be respectful of this man's time, because otherwise I could just go on and on. So, but before we end, is there anything that you thought I was going to ask about, or you wanted to say that we didn't get to, at least for this episode?
Not really, Diane. This has been a blast. It's all true. Your ability to just pull out these things that it's almost like the very thing that we're talking about is being expressed in the podcast. And isn't that a beautiful thing, that it's like, this is what needs to be said. So thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for having me on. It's been a blast. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. So I have one final question for you. And that is that if we were going to have a billboard anywhere in the world with Conner's message on it, everyone is going to get to see it in their language. They'll understand it. What would it say?
I knew you were going to ask me this. So there's the obvious answer, which is like, what's a billboard going to do? And, it's like all that and kind of stuff. But that's not the point.
No.
Hashtag, right? Do I get to hashtag it? So
yes.
Hashtag transcend. And really it's because we've been denied, except for those who have faith, who are able to kind of be in the flow of something influencing their lives, some higher power, right? We have been denied that. Our culture has denied us that. Our intellectual culture, scientific culture, we've been denied that. And the same thing goes for the economic structure that we live in and may not be living in much longer. The political structure, the political narratives. So when I say transcend, it sounds real cool, but like what I mean is like essentially question all those things and be willing to look. It's always both and. When you look at these things, is it a matter of left, right, red, blue? Is it a matter of, up, down, left, right? It's always both and. The answers is always some kind of fusion. Now that doesn't mean that when you're handed a solution, a narrative that is disguised as a solution, you should question that too. But at a soul level, you'll know it when you see it. But that's, I guess that would have to be it, because I knew you were going to ask this and I had to think about it for a few seconds. I was like, oh gosh, what am I going to say? It might be something like that, Diane, that we just need to be willing to kind of become something different spiritually. That does not mean become cyborgs. That means become, you know what I mean? I just mean, when I say transcend, I don't mean transcend the human, because the human is
right.
Beautiful. And so, So
hashtag transcend. I love it. Yes. Yes, I love that billboard. So Conner, thank you so much for being on the show and entertaining all of my questions and sharing your wisdom. And you guys, check out Making the Medicine, the podcast. It's amazing. I love it. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Diane.
So remember, everybody, to keep your face to the sun, because the shadows fall behind you. You are a rock star here on purpose with a purpose. And until the next episode of Someone Gets Me, be well. Thank you for listening. I trust you gained some valuable inspiration and information. Please join me and other visionaries in the Someone Gets Me Facebook group. Or for more information on my services and additional episode's, visit someonegetsme.com. Again, thanks for listening.